cloud. Personal health, unless they want to. And we also make sure that we're not giving out any personal medical advice today. So I will answer questions as best as I can. Anything that I can't answer today, I'll definitely jot down and we'll communicate via email or a phone call later on. I want to continue to be a resource for you in these forums. So I think I had one more participant here and I have a bunch of questions that were sent in ahead of time. So I want to address those. So today's topic, when I was asked to choose a topic for the upcoming months, and I saw, we're hosting these open forums, and we usually kind of choose something as the physicians here to talk about. I figured I just wanted to open up the conversation to the community and say, what questions do you have? Knowing that I don't have all the answers, but I can maybe guide you in the right direction and we can open up that conversation for curiosity and where to start. So as the marketing suggests, people who send in their questions ahead of time will take priority just because I've had time to think about them, if I'm being fully honest. So the very first question that I want to address here with everybody. So I got a bunch from one person, and if you're here, I'm going to address a couple of them. I can't do all of them because some of them were a little bit more personalized. But the very first question is, what is muscle testing, and on what type of person would you use it on? So my first answer is, we don't practice muscle testing, aka applied kinesiology, in this office, but basically it's a practice based on muscle weakness reflecting dysfunction in the body. So if there's some sort of disease or dysfunction in the body, that would be reflected by a certain muscle group and the weakness that exhibits during a testing. It's an energetic practice. Because we don't practice it, I'm not going to go into a great length of detail to say what type of people would you practice it on, but instead I would just refer you to speak with a practitioner of applied kinesiology or muscle testing to get some more information about that. But that's the basic concept there. Another question that was sent in is the curiosity of, can childhood vaccines be detoxed from a child's body completely? And also it was kind of like a second question on that. If that child who had vaccines when young isn't spiking fevers when they get sick, is that a gut issue? So to answer the first part, the body does one of two things when it encounters toxins. It detoxes it through one of 5 eliminatory organs, and that's the liver, lungs, kidneys, colon, and skin, or it stores it. So it comes out of the bloodstream and doesn't affect your biochemistry. And usually our stores are the bone or the fat. The thing that I want you to hear me say is the body is brilliant. If it's functioning properly and all of those organs of elimination are working, then we are able to detox the amount of toxins we encounter on a daily basis. We're trusting those processes to take things in and flush things out. It's also brilliant in its ability to store them in places so it's not affecting our blood biochemistry, the bones, and the fat. When we start seeing issues with toxins or toxemia, it's typically one of those 5 eliminatory organs are compromised, and that could be from something like constipation, leaky gut or malabsorption, kidney disease, liver disease. So many different concepts, or hormone imbalance. So those types of things can compromise asthma, right? COPD, any respiratory disease. The lungs are a huge detox organ that usually get left out of the equation. That can affect our body's ability to eliminate toxins. Therefore, it chooses to store more of them. And sometimes those compartments or body stores can get full enough that then those toxins start leaching back out into the bloodstream and cause active issues. So those are the population types that environmental medicine practitioners, sometimes myself, will get involved with, like a chelation therapy or a detox therapy, or promoting the pathways that are already innately possessed by the body. In general, it's hard for me to answer that question because not all children detox the same, not all humans detox the same, but generally speaking, the ingredients in vaccines can be detoxed or stored in appropriate places if everything's functioning properly. I think most of the time we see vaccine injury is when somebody has been a little bit vulnerable to begin with. That's not always the truth. I can't do individualized medicine here on a Zoom call, but for the most part, if everything's ticking properly, then we should be able to detox. The second part of that question was really interesting to me, is that if you've had your childhood vaccines and you're not spiking a fever when you get sick, does that mean there's some sort of dysfunction? Or I think the question was, does that mean leaky gut? In my opinion, broadly speaking, no. When we have a vaccine, essentially what we're doing is priming the immune system for diseases that are to come. So I'm not going to get into the COVID discussion here because it's new. Traditional vaccines, it's an introduction to your immune system to say, hey, here's this disease that I think you might encounter and I'd like you to be prepared for it. So we're not mounting this huge, gigantic immune response when we do see it. The reason you're probably not seeing a fever if you've had the vaccine against that actual pathogen or disease is because your body's already kind of ready for it. It fights it off and it gets rid of it. A fever is mounted when the body's working very hard at fighting infection. So broadly speaking, if you're not spiking a fever, when you see an infection that you've already been introduced to, it's probably because your body's not fighting so hard and it's overcoming that infection without having to spike that fever. Again, that's not always the truth, but that's the theory and idea behind vaccine as being preventive, is that general introduction to the body of a disease. Does anybody have any follow-up questions on that topic? I mean, I know it's kind of like broad here, but if it opens up any more discussion points, I'm happy to hold that space for a couple of minutes. Feel good? Okay. And then also just, I know we had a couple of people join on here. Jen and Patty, we can see your names if you want to turn on your video. I love seeing faces. This is being recorded. We post these to the website when we're done for easy access later. There's also a chat box on Zoom. And if you click on it, you can send a message to everyone, or you can pick just me and send me a chat and I'll try to address those as we go on as well. If at any point in time you have a question, just unmute yourself and say, hey, stop, got a question, or raise your hand if your video is on. This is definitely meant to be very engaging. I want participation. Another question, kind of a simple, hopefully answer. Homemade sourdough bread, gluten-free, can we do it? Depends on the flour you're using. So if you're using wheat flour, it's going to have gluten in it most likely. So that is going to determine whether or not it's going to be gluten-free. So just determine if all the ingredients are gluten-free, then it should be easier to do. If it's depending on how gluten-free you need to be, if you're celiac, if you're sensitive, what your enzymatic activity is, what are your responses, that's going to be dependent on whether or not it's easier to digest. So typically it depends on the type of flour that you're using. Lots of questions about homeopathy. And I just feel awful because I don't practice homeopathy. I'm the one doc here that doesn't really practice a whole lot of homeopathy, but I wanted to address, I'm trained in it, some of the answers here to make sure that I'm staying true to the true open forum here. So homeopathy is a really phenomenal practice. I had one of the best teachers on the planet in school, Mike Baker. He's a homeopath and really taught us and trained us well. And it's not something that I won't use if somebody asks for it, or I think it's really indicated. I definitely use it as a tool. It's just not one of the main modalities I use. And each practitioner has their own kind of specialties that they dive into and utilize. So what I do want to say about homeopathy, this specific question is, what is approving? What does approving mean? And I think that's a really interesting question. And I've got that quite a few times. And I've had a few people tell me, excuse me, that they have proved homeopathic remedies because they took it and it worked. And that's not actually what approving is. So I wrote some notes so I can make sure I say this. So approving is basically a collection of symptoms on experiments in healthy subjects with hypotoxic doses. So they're not using toxic doses of a remedy, and it's healthy subjects. So it's a double-blind study where they give or distribute a homeopathic remedy to them, and then they follow them at certain dosing for a certain period of time compared with the placebo to determine if these healthy subjects start to get the symptoms that would be indicated by the remedy. So you do not actually prove a remedy by getting the symptoms or feeling better by it if you have the disease, if that makes sense. So if it works, it's not necessarily approving. Approving has to happen by 3 criteria. Again, we record the symptoms from healthy subjects using toxic, hypotoxic, and high potency doses. They don't ever use toxic doses in a randomized double blinded control study. Those are just done from toxicology reports. Those symptoms are drawn from all 3 levels of health: mental, emotional, and physical. And then the symptoms included have been cured with the treatment of the whole organism after administration to a sick person. So not only do they have to prove that symptoms develop in a healthy person, then they also have to show that it alleviates symptoms or ameliorates symptoms in a sick person. So it has to happen in 3 phases. So hopefully that helps with kind of understanding the proving of a homeopathic remedy. My child got a probiotic and it seemed like it constipated them. Is that possible? And if so, absolutely. We are more bug than human. We have more bugs in our gut than we have cells in our body, which is kind of crazy. If you have a healthy microbiome and your bowels are working great, or even if sometimes you do have digestive issues, a probiotic is not always the answer. So I can't say this enough. There's different things in the natural medicine world. And if you haven't seen a previous lecture that I've done before, I do advise it just because I'm very passionate about it, but it's natural medicines versus nutritional supplements, like what you need to know, because not all of them are benign. Not everything is indicated for everybody. And you'll see a lot of times health food stores or health coaches will be like, oh, this helps everybody I know. Take it, tell your neighbor to take it, tell your neighbor's brother's cousin's son's daughter to take it. Like, that's not how it works. These are still medicines. Not only are they medicines that your body has to take in and need support in, they're medicines that we just talked about. They have to detox it then. Anything you put in your body then has to detox and eliminate. So if it's not indicated or if it's not actually helpful, you could be causing harm because your body then has to eliminate it. So when it comes to probiotics and gut health, it's really important with my patient base to say, what are your symptoms? Can we do a PCR study of your microbiome? And if not, let's try with probiotic and see if it helps, but it's always a trial because sometimes they can cause more constipation, more diarrhea. The probiotics are essentially in there to break down, digest your foods and move things along if advanced in your microbiome. If disease, or if you don't, then I say leave alone if add anything else in that. Hopefully that helps. But yes, that is a very common side effect of taking, because sometimes it makes things worse. That can happen with anything. Vitamin D is a big one. I'm going to address that in this question and answer period. I get a lot of people talking about vitamin D. Should I take it? Shouldn't I? Is it good for everybody? I'm deficient or I'm over. Kind of referring back to the last statement, not everything is good for everybody all the time. So I always recommend getting your vitamin D levels. The majority of the patient base that I see is deficient. So a maintenance dose can be really helpful, but it isn't benign. Vitamin D doesn't just go into the body and say, hey, I'm here to help, right? It affects a lot of other processes downstream. The big one being it increases our absorption of calcium in the small intestine. And when we increase the absorption of calcium in the small intestine, we can also change our parathyroid hormone activity, and that can get elevated, which makes our calcium higher. So there's a bunch of different downstream effects that vitamin D can have if we're not doing it responsibly. So if you're on a vitamin D supplement, I do recommend getting those values checked at least once a year, especially if you're in the Northern Hemisphere. Question here, why are blood panels and other screenings not covered by insurance when ordered by a naturopathic doctor? I'm tailoring your question just a little bit here because really what the question said when ordered by a naturopath, this is something that's at the federal level right now, and I want to address it just so we can start to spread the good word. Semantics between naturopath and naturopathic doctor makes it sound like we have an ego. We really don't, but we went to medical school for 4 years, postgraduate, and we have a doctorate in naturopathic medicine. Naturopathic doctors or physicians are licensed primary care physicians in the state of Idaho and many other states around the country. So there are lay naturopaths who are brilliant. They know herbalism, they know, botanical medicine, they may know homeopathy. I'm not taking anything away from them, but honestly, or it can be an online certificate that they acquire to do that. So I'm not trying to nitpick the question, and I'm going to get to the answer of it. But while it is such a big concept right now, and people will come into my office and be like, well, I'm going to go to a real doctor, but I just wanted to talk to you about this. I do like to clarify, like, we are primary care physicians licensed in the state of Idaho. And also there is a huge difference between a naturopath and a naturopathic doctor. So moving on, why are blood panels and screenings not covered by insurance when ordered by a naturopathic doctor? It depends on what state you're in. If that physician is contracted with insurance companies, then often those labs can be covered by your insurance. Now, Medicare is the cutoff. If you're on Medicare, Medicare federally will not accept anything that a naturopathic doctor orders. They just don't cover any modalities, orders, consults, medications, anything that we do, Medicare doesn't cover. That's just an unfortunate truth. Also at the federal level, trying to work our way in. The good news is we are in with the VA. So the Veterans Association has started taking naturopathic physicians under their coverage. What I will say is if it's not Medicare and you have a private insurance company, often blood panels and other screenings are covered by insurance. That naturopathic doctor, whoever you're seeing, does have to know how to code. So actually I can show you here. When we fill out a lab requisition, and many of you have probably seen this, all of your demographics are here. The labs that we want to order go down here. And then we have to write in different diagnosis codes here that the insurance company then reads to justify payment. And if the naturopathic doctor that you're seeing isn't contracted with an insurance, they may not offer that service to you. Here at Coeur d'Alene Healing Arts, we are not contracted with insurance, but when I do run labs, we do offer, would you like this to be run through your insurance, or would you like to do that private pay? And sometimes insurance will cover it based on the insurance coding process there. Some other panels that aren't necessarily approved by the FDA, some stool tests, some urine tests, some hair tests. There's some other testing that we do that are a little bit considered alternative. And I think Dr. Hunter actually has a whole lecture on that on our website as well, alternative testing and how to interpret results. Those are not covered by insurance, nor will they probably ever be as long as they're not approved in the conventional world. The other thing that I'll say about insurance is kind of a check-in is if you are a patient of Coeur d'Alene Healing Arts and you have private insurance, even if you call them and ask if they cover naturopathic doctors and they say no, ask for a super bill. Do it. The worst they can say is no. The best they can say is I'll give you 20%. I'll give you 100%. They can give you some sort of allotment that will help with the cost incurred with seeing a cash-based practice. So our staff is trained in how to offer that. Please advocate for yourself, ask for a super bill. I would say the worst they can say is no, but I'm definitely one of those people too that'll keep asking. They're like, hey, can you give me something here? Tell them how much money you're going to save them when you don't get chronic disease because you're seeing a naturopathic doctor, right? You're not going to have to pay for this later because you're going to invest in me now. And then ask to talk to somebody else and ask to talk to the supervisor. Ask the questions, advocate. If you're a patient of mine, we celebrate advocacy here. If you're on Medicare but have a secondary insurance, are they likely to cover it? They can. Sometimes the secondary or private insurance will cover it if you're on Medicare. Every single one of my Medicare patients, and over half of my practice is actually Medicare. I say, first and foremost, call your insurance company before we do anything. Ask them, ask the questions. Will you cover this? Can they cover this? If they don't, then most of the times I'll advise, and most of my Medicare patients do have a primary. I'll say, hey, let's find a primary that's willing to work with me, and I'll submit a lab order or a lab wish list, as I call it. You can bring that to your primary care doctor and get that run and get it drawn through insurance. We want to work with you financially. We want to do preventive medicine, but also acknowledging the constraints that's put on every single healthcare provider with the insurance companies. So whatever we can do to help you, get creative. I have plenty of patients who all run 3 or 4 labs every 6 months, and then their primary runs the rest of them. So as a team, we make sure everything's covered for their health and to support them financially. What are the best forms of magnesium to take on a daily basis? That is one of my favorite questions. So gold star for that question asker. Magnesium is a conversation I have with a lot of people because it comes in so many different forms. And I'm going to ask for participation now because I'm gonna take a drink of water. What forms of magnesium does everybody know? Go ahead, raise your hand, unmute yourself, shout it out. Let's have a party.
3 and 8.
3 and 8.
Glycinate.
Glycinate.
Think.
What else? Anybody know of anything else?
Stearate.
Stearate. There's so many more, guys. We've got gluconate, we've got malate, oxide, citrate, tons of different magnesiums, and they're all chelated with a different agent and they all do different things, interestingly enough. So that question, while it's one of my favorite, the answer is it depends. And here's why. And this kind of goes back to, nutritional supplements. They're not, regulated by the FDA. Therefore, their marketing and their labels can say pretty much whatever they want, and they can make you all the promises in the world. And they're not held to any responsibility to put what they're saying they're putting in there in the actual supplement. It's a dangerous game they're playing. It's a dangerous game we're all playing. So make sure we're, responsible with it. My favorite one that I prescribe often is Magnesium Calm powder. You guys all familiar with that? It's the big raspberry lemonade and it says calm across the front. And the marketing all says, hey, this is going to calm you down. It's great for your nervous system. Calm is the word. And I prescribe it for constipation. It has nothing to do with your nervous system because it's magnesium citrate. It's not absorbed well in your GI tract. Therefore, it pulls water in and it helps you poop. Now, pooping might make you calm if you're constipated. It might be a great secondary effect. But magnesium glycinate is going to be the form we want to focus on if we're looking for nervous system regulation, relaxation, calming the nerves down, anxiety, sleep support. Magnesium malate, remember M for muscle, is going to be helpful for those skeletal muscles, calming the muscular system down, muscle spasms, restless leg syndrome, different things like that. Magnesium threonate is the one for neurologic concerns, migraines, traumatic brain injuries, sometimes with anxiety as well there. So when you say, what kind of magnesium do you take on a daily basis? It's going to depend on what the condition is. If you're talking about heart conditions, then we may want to go towards a stearate or a malate. So tons of different, and then oxide, also not absorbed well in the colon and really will bring water in. That's a little bit more osmotic than citrate even, and it will help with constipation. So kind of a two-for answer there as far as it depends, and make sure you're reading the labels, because even if the front says calm, you're going to go meditate and it's got water and leaves floating all over it, and then you look at the back and it says citrate, know that you're going to feel calm because you pooped, not because the magnesium did anything for your nervous system. Which again, I feel better when I poop. So that might be a secondary effect. I hope that answers that question. Any other kind of secondary questions on that?
Yeah, so if you need it for nervous system and muscles, maybe nerves, nerves and muscles, what do you have a brand you can recommend and a dosage amount?
Yep. So dosing, I'm going to shy away from just a little bit because it's kind of breaching the individualized dosing. And I do prescribe dosing very specifically for my patients, but I can give you kind of a bracket. So what I recommend typically is we use the brand Vital Nutrients and a magnesium glycinate malate mix. So it does work with the nervous system and the muscles. And I really like that blend because it's working on both of those spheres and they often go hand in hand. Right? When we're excitable or anxious, then we get more muscle spasms and vice versa. And then I stick between about 200 and 400 milligrams per day. And typically that's a dosing that I'll do at night. Magnesium is one of the least invasive natural medicines that I'll use for sleep disorders. I'm having troubles relaxing myself at night. I have troubles falling asleep. Most of my people who come in with insomnia or sleep disturbances will start very low dose magnesium to see if that helps calm the nervous system down. I work a lot with people with Parkinson's and they suffer from restless leg syndrome very often. So again, magnesium is one of the very first low intervention natural medicines that I prescribe that's really helpful. keep in mind that magnesium, when it's absorbed in whatever form it is, so outside of oxide and citrate, mostly the absorbable kinds, is a necessary cofactor for hundreds, and I'm taking hundreds of biochemical enzymatic processes. So not only is magnesium therapeutic at certain doses, it's necessary. It's an essential mineral for our body to actually function like it should. So I can't hype magnesium up enough. Another one of the questions I had on a pre questionnaire was, you know, what top things do you find that every kid needs in their diets? And I'm going to take kid out. You know, I don't think every person needs one thing. We do practice individualized medicine here, but I love magnesium. I love it.
Does it help if you take vitamin D with it? I mean, does it help the vitamin D assimilate better?
That's a really good question. I don't know the answer to that. It might. I don't think it's going to make that much of a difference. But I honestly don't know. I can look that up and shoot you a message later, or you can shoot an email to the clinic. Usually what I'll have, and I usually say it at the beginning, if there's a question I can't answer and you're the question asker, you can always send a message to our clinic at info@cdahealingarts.com and just say, hey, I was the one who asked the question about this, and I'll make sure to get back to you within 48 hours.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. The next thing I want to say is magnesium. While I sit here and say I heart magnesium and yay, yay, yay for it, I also want to, I know I sound like a broken record, you guys, but I have these conversations with so many of my patients. People with Parkinson's shouldn't take magnesium with their levodopa, right? It inhibits the body's absorption of levodopa. So when we talk about these natural medicines, make sure that you have somebody on your team that can say, how do I take them? When do I take them? That was a great question. Does it matter if I take it with vitamin D? Because these things do matter. Even though they're natural medicines, it doesn't mean that they're always benign. I have plenty of people with Parkinson's and like, let's go through your whole med supplement list. And we start peeling apart. When are you taking it? How are you taking it? What is it interacting with? And we don't change a thing. And there's improvement just because of the hygiene of how they're taking medications and natural medicines. So it's a really great question. I got a question to repeat the type of magnesium. Which type?
The one you mentioned from Vital Nutrients?
Oh, yep, Vital Nutrients, and it's a magnesium glycinate malate. And that one is, I want to say it's 120 milligrams per capsule. And so I usually do like I said, like a bracket, depending on people's need, anywhere from, it could be 100 to 500 milligrams, but really I stick between the 200 and 400 milligrams for a therapeutic dose if we're looking for an effect.
How do you spell malate?
Malate. And I sent you a message back there, Don. Thanks for unmuting yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I can put that on here. Other nutrients. Everybody see that in the chat box? Cool. Any other questions from the field here?
Yes, I have a big debate about melatonin.
Okay.
And the biggest thing is people are saying, well, some doctors I've talked to, natural doctors, just take it kind of on a temporary basis when you really need it. I've seen a paper talking about how it can really mess up your hormone, kind of your regulation of your sleep hormone, stuff like that. So yeah, what do you think about that?
Yeah, so of course, my disclaimer, because I'm being recorded now, is going to be, it depends, right? It always will be. But here's what I know about melatonin. I love melatonin for temporary relief of sleep disturbance until we can get the body to heal properly. I also love melatonin in high doses for its antioxidant properties. Melatonin, while we want to give the brain credit, right, for making a lot of these hormones or neurotransmitters, serotonin, melatonin, dopamine, all of the above, we actually see the gut being responsible for making most of this, and melatonin's in that field. Most of our melatonin is actually made in our gut. Melatonin is actually a precursor to glutathione, believe it or not. And glutathione is the primary antioxidant of the central nervous system. So as an integrative neurology practitioner, I love melatonin. Now, anytime we use something exogenous, which means we're putting something in the body that it's not making itself to try to support, supplement, treat, there's going to be downstream effects, whether they're positive, negative, whatever the case may be. Melatonin will have an efficacy for sleep support up until about 12 milligrams. So it's dose dependent until then. 1 milligram might knock you out a certain percent, 5 milligram might be a little bit more effective, 12 milligrams might be a little bit more effective. Anything above that hasn't been shown to be much more potent, I will say, even with a higher milligram dose. The benefit we see from higher melatonin doses is with that antioxidant capability, how it functions in the rest of the body, not just for sleep support. So I'm going to say melatonin supplementation for sleep difficulties is an extremely effective tool to help regulate that melatonin/cortisol imbalance if that's the reason for sleep difficulty. If you're stressed, if your cortisol response is up, if your sympathetic nervous system tone is dominant, if we are on a night shift and we have circadian rhythm disruption, if we are exposed to blue light and TV and cell phones close to bedtime, then a melatonin supplement can be extremely useful to, I always like to say in my practice, remind your brain it's sleepy time. Hey, we're supposed to be sleeping. Here's what you're supposed to be making. And, let's get that going. Let's get that process going. Here's where we are. I typically will only prescribe melatonin for that specific concern for a 3-month period. And that's because in those 3 months, I want to be working with my patients on other sleep hygiene practices that they may need to enhance their sleep quality without the use of supplementation. Rarely do I, as a practitioner, prescribe something for life unless it's a chronic lifelong diagnosis. Insomnia, for the most part, in my practice, is something that we continue to address. Because our body heals, it detoxes. There's so to engage sleep, or healthy sleep. Oh, shoot. I'm going to pause here. I'm still here. I just don't want to say anything deep in content if you guys are losing connection. So
you said you would prescribe for 3 months. Is that on a nightly basis? Consistently for 3 months is safe?
yes. Yep. And typically what I'll tell people is that the first 2 weeks of taking melatonin, you might feel a little groggy in the morning. You might have some side effects. There might be some, unless it's really vivid dreams or nightmares or things that are impacting your sleep worse than not sleeping in melatonin. It's not the answer for everything sleep related, right? So insomnia comes in a lot of different shapes and forms, and melatonin might be the answer for some because of that disruption in their production. It might not be the answer for everybody. So typically what I'll do is I'll do a 2-week trial period, and then we can prescribe it for 3 months. And in that 2-week trial period, I say, your brain is getting used to this routine. It's getting used to this signal. So give it 2 weeks to adjust to it. And if you're not having any adverse reactions, then it would be safe to use for 3 months while we continue to address the underlying causes. I don't see any concern with that. It's not something I want people to be on long term, mostly just because the philosophy of the body being able to heal itself is that it wouldn't need melatonin every night. But when it comes to the risk benefit, which is something I weigh with every prescriptive medication, whether it's pharmaceutical, natural, whatever the case may be, oftentimes the benefit will outweigh the risk with melatonin use.
And then is there a brand you'd recommend?
Yeah, there's a few that we carry here in our dispensary, and I talk about those only because those are the only brands that I have personally, or us 3 doctors have personally vetted out for quality assurance. And we have a Vital Nutrients, a Claire Labs, and we have one other brand that's running away from my brain right now. I'm so sorry. But those 2. And speaking of brands, not every brand is created equal with each of its supplements. That's the other confusing thing about supplements.
Yeah.
So there's some brands that make a really good quality X supplement, but their Y supplement might not pass a consumer lab report. So it is a second job that I didn't know I was taking on in the profession, to be honest, but like, hey, I need to prescribe this, natural medicine for one of my patients, and I go on consumer lab and we vet it out and make sure it matches label potency. And I say, oh, this seems like it was a really good brand for this supplement. Should we try it for that one? And it shows up that it failed a consumer lab report. So it can be a little tedious, but there are some brands out there that tend to have higher quality supplements. And those are the ones that we focus on carrying here at the clinic dispensary and through our online full script account.
If everyone's okay, can I ask one more question on this subject?
Sure.
Okay, so if I have tried it only up to, I think, maybe 2.5 or 4 milligrams. I'm really kind of wary about using it, but it knocks me out really quick. But I'll wake up in 2 or 3 hours and be wide awake. And I want to take it to keep me sleeping through the whole night. So
Yeah.
Is that I'm not taking enough, or is that something else?
Well, it could be a couple different things. So the first question I'm always going to ask my patients is that the thing that's missing, right? Is that the thing that your body needs to sleep effectively? And if it doesn't seem to be effective, then we move on to something else. Now, what I see a lot of with people who use melatonin say, oh, I actually fall asleep fine. I just can't stay asleep. And I don't know if that's your case or not, but it happens a lot of the time. And what I do then is prescribe it when you wake up in the morning or at 2 a.m, like I said before. And I usually say, if you wake up before 3 a.m. and you're wide awake, that's when you take your melatonin, not at 9 p.m. If you can fall asleep just fine, but then you wake up, bing, sometime between midnight and 3 a.m., that's when you take your slow dose, 1, 2, 3 milligram melatonin, and an immediate release one. So then it can remind your brain, I say it's a little boot in the butt, right? To say, hey, we're still sleeping, keep doing this thing. For those patients, I will say, hey, for a couple of weeks, you might feel groggy in the morning because you're resetting that sleep cycle. But then your brain gets used to it and you need less of it and you might sleep through the night. If you have a difficult time falling asleep and it helps you with that, but then you're waking up in the middle of the night, you can either 1, double dose, so take lower doses twice through the night to keep that pattern going, or you can switch over to a sustained or extended release melatonin. That's like a 3 or 5 milligram, but then it slowly releases in your body. So its effect will last longer instead of having that immediate spike and then it dropping out.
That's great. Thank you.
Of course. I have a question here. How does naturopathic medicine compare with allopathic medicine in treating diseases such as cancer, heart disease, etc.? That is a very good and loaded question. One of the tenets, and I say this, and some of my colleagues might hang me out to dry for this, but that's okay. And if you're a patient of mine, you've probably heard it before. One of the tenets of naturopathic medicine is finding the root cause, right? We want to find the root cause. We want to treat the root cause. If you have made it to the age of 30, chances are, even if we find the root cause, you ain't going to fix it, right? It's been there, done, gone, forgotten, and it caused a lot of downstream effects. So while I do think it's beneficial to know what it was and to figure out what had happened, I try to make not the promise to my patients that once we find it, we're going to fix it because, well, number one, most of my patients are over the age of 70. So that's a lot of digging. And 2, what benefit is that going to do, right? If you're suffering now, than doing all that digging to find there. So while it's beneficial, please don't hang me out to dry, profession. I like to blend what's happening now. What do you want? What's your quality of life? What do you want your life to look like? How do you want to show up in the world? 2, what are the symptoms? What are the obstacles? What is the health concerns that's inhibiting that? And 3, what is your philosophy? What is your values and morals, and how do you want to address it? And then let's get going. Let's start treating. My favorite metaphor to use is about alligators. Do I have any patients in this field here who wants to fill out the alligator metaphor for me? That remember it anyway? And you don't have to out yourself. Anyway, I always say every patient who comes to my office is in a lake full of alligators and they're in a canoe. And I don't like to feel surrounded. I don't know about you. I don't like it. I want to line them up in a river. I want to find the one that's going to eat you first. So you come into my office and you have eczema, or you have cancer, or you have heart disease, or you have Parkinson's disease. And you say, I want to feel better. I'm going to say, great. That might be the biggest alligator in your river, but it's not the one that's going to eat you first. We have to figure out what that one is and then help your body improve and survive long enough to get to that one. Chances are all of those alligators are feeding together. And once you get the one that's going to eat you first, the biggest one out there might shrink down a little bit and be less scary. So how are we different than allopathic medicine? To get back to the question, I think what we do is take a 20,000 foot view of you as a human instead of a tunnel vision view. If you have heart disease, yeah, I'm going to look at your heart, but I'm also going to look at your stress. I'm going to look at your neurologic function. I'm going to look at your connection and your community and your relationships. I'm going to look at your bowel movements. I'm going to make sure that your prostate's okay. If you have a prostate, I'm going to look at you as a human and say, how are you with the world? And what else is contributing to this heart disease? We have studies, if you know or have heard of Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris, she's genius. And she gives a TED talk about ACEs, adverse childhood events. And she says, we have lined up in front of us in allopathic medicine, all of the risk factors for heart disease. So don't smoke, right? Don't drink too much. Don't get overweight, eat right. So we have all these risk factors that we talk about with heart disease. We have data that shows people with adverse childhood events of a score over 4. And if you Google it up, are at a higher risk for cardiovascular events, but physicians aren't talking about this in their office. Cardiologists aren't talking about this in their office when you go to them. Then that's how I would say we're different. We're going to talk about those things. We're going to address you, mind, body, and spirit, to say, how are you in the world? And how is that affecting each individual system? And how is that system affecting all of your other systems? And how can we support you so you can heal? A lot of times people say, what's your philosophy in treating medicine? Especially if they come in like, I've never seen a naturopathic doctor before. What's your philosophy? And I look at them and say, I don't get to have one. My philosophy is, what do you want to do to heal? If I tell you what my philosophy is, then I'm just imposing my belief system on you and how you want to heal. My job is to educate you on what are your options. Do you want to take a statin for your cholesterol? Do you want to do natural medicine for your cholesterol? Do you want to change your diet and lifestyle for your cholesterol? Do you want to do nothing? Does it not bother you? Is it not concerning? Do you want to do further testing? So here's the buffet. What do you want to do? Where do you want to meet? And you don't have to keep it written in stone, and you don't have to choose one. You can choose 2. You can change your option. Hey, I thought I wanted to do it naturally, but it turns out Christmas cookies are really good. So I'd like a little medication. I want some support along the way. Great, let's do it. Here's the side effects for some of those medications. How can we support you if you encounter those? What does that mean to you? So it's a deeper conversation into health. And when you ask me, I guess I'll kind of caveat that I don't have a philosophy. If you were to ask me what my philosophy is, I think the driving force in my practice is what defines your quality of life, because that's different for everybody. So if you have a really, really difficult time giving up certain foods and you have type 2 diabetes, great. How do we not take away those foods, but how do we pair those optimally so your body can digest, absorb, use your glucose a little bit better, reduce your insulin resistance. And then also, are there natural or pharmacologic medications that can keep you safe? Great, let's pair those together. And in 3 months, if you don't like the way you feel on these meds and you're like, I'm motivated to do something different, awesome. Let's change it up. Let's do it safely and effectively. But really, and I'm prior military, so I probably use way too many analogies like this, but you're the captain of your health ship, right? There's no way I could ever be the captain. I'm never going to be, I'm not going to try. I got my own stuff going on. I got a husband and kids and life. I don't want to be the captain of your ship. I don't want to do your grocery shopping. I don't want to go home and cook for you. I don't want to tell you get your butt on the elliptical. You're the captain. You tell me which way you want to go, and I'm going to give you all the support that I can to get there. If it doesn't happen, there's no judgment, there's no shame, there's no guilt. Hey, what were the obstacles to doing those things? Let's be creative and brainstorm and figure out a new way. Obviously, it hit me on a passion point there, so it's a great question. And I know it's not a real tangible answer, but I think if you experience naturopathic medicine, I think you're going to get that feeling of the individualized medicine that says, hey, I'm in charge of my health, and I have this person in my corner who's going to offer me some pretty good advice and expertise and how my body should work optimally for the way I want it to. Does that help? Does that answer it? Is that good? Okay. What else we got out here? I could just keep going with analogies about health. I had a question about pots and pans, and I'm honestly just going to say I don't know. Ones that don't leach into your food. So I really like, unless you have an iron overload condition like hemochromatosis or some neurologic conditions, I love a good cast iron pan as long as you season it correctly. I think those are really great. I'm doing an iron talk, I believe in two or 4 months. That goes over all things iron. So we'll discuss that a little bit more. But I guess I should preface it with some of the environmental medicine questions I might not be the best resource for, or I won't say I might not be, I'm probably not. I know I'm not the best resource for, because that's not my specialty. And there are people out there who specialize in environmental medicine and what's out there that can get you. And if you're very sensitive or you have dysfunction in your detox mechanisms and things like that, how to ramp that up. Now, I practice it a lot because I love to support our detox pathways. I love to avoid triggers and insults and help your body absorb the nutrients that it needs and get rid of toxins in your poop, in your urine, in your sweat. How can we optimize those things? But when it comes to, the nitty gritty of somebody who's very, very sensitive, then I do think that a specialist is warranted in that realm, because sometimes, not sometimes, I will say 100% of the time, a detox protocol is not benign and it's hard on your body. And does it make you feel better? Sometimes, yeah. Does it make you feel worse first? Yeah. And some people who are not real vital in the moment can't withhold or withstand a detox protocol. So that's another thing that's out on the market all the time, right? You go to natural food stores, you go to these places and they're like, detox, liver cleanse, do all these things for your body. And when I have a really devitalized patient saying, maybe I should do a detox, I'm like, whoa, no. You are so devitalized that if we were to mobilize toxins from the brilliant stores that your body put it in for a reason, you're going to get more sick first. And I don't think your body can withstand that yet. Let's build you up. Let's get you the nutrients that you need. Let's start the healing process and then maybe consider a detox protocol in the future. So, if you could put an epitaph at the end of this video, it feels like it has a pretty common theme of not everything you see or hear is benign, right? Not everything natural is safe. Not everything is indicated for everybody. I haven't heard of Zupu. If you want to tell me about it, I'm happy to comment, but I don't know what that is. And I think that was Jen. So if you want to unmute yourself, a colon cleanse. It's a brilliant name, Zupu, colon cleanse. I get that kind of factors into what I just, I mean, it's not indicated for everybody. Some people really do need colon cleansers or colon hydrotherapy, and that can help kind of re-trigger chronic constipation, atonic bowels, different things like that. But I'm pretty selective over who I send people for those types of therapies. Number one, if it is something that's going up into the anus, there's always a risk for infection. It can be traumatizing for some people, and it's not always effective. So we have to be very careful with when we, I guess, counteract the natural form of what we're supposed to be doing. That being said, colon hydrotherapy is very effective when it's clinically indicated. Capsules, I'd have to do a little more research on that, Jen. If you want to send me a message through the email, I'm happy to do a little bit more research, and then I'm just going to expand my response time out to a week anytime I have to do research on a product. So just shoot me a message and I'll make sure to get back to you. Hot new coffee enemas, that goes right back into those. It can be helpful depending on the patient. It's not for everybody. They can help with detox, they can help with a little colon cleanse, they can help with chronic constipation. But again, it depends on the person and what the indication is. So if you are constipated, chances are if you come to my clinic, you're going to get water plus fiber plus movement equals poop. And then we're going to do it again. And then we're going to do it again. And then we're going to make sure that you're doing it. And we're going to make sure that those three things are being met long before we put anything in the out. Because rarely is the problem all the way down in the colon, I will say, for chronic constipation. You guys were just about out of time here. I think I actually went about 8 minutes over already. Again, the email is open, info@cdahealingarts.com. If you just say attention, Dr. Karin, give me some time to respond, but keep advocating. Don't let yourself get forgotten either. And I always want to keep that open. That goes for any time. These forums are here on a monthly basis, so we can reach out to the community and connect and answer questions and provide information and advice. But we're here as a resource. The one thing that I do, I like to be accessible, and I understand that a cash practice in naturopathic medicine isn't. That's just the straight up truth of it. So if there's a question that I can answer for you that's safe and is not offering medical advice, ask it. I love to be a resource. I want to be out there more. COVID kind of thwarted a lot of our in-person lectures and different gatherings and things like that. But spread the word, tell people to jump onto these forums, ask questions, keep advocating, keep fighting, ask questions. You guys are awesome. Thanks for being here. And this will be posted up later. Take care.